When Walter and I went to visit my husband's parents, my mother-in-law picked us up from the airport. But instead of letting us ride in her car, she said we had to walk home. It's a long journey, about 3 hours each way. Even though I'm strong, this made me really upset. I almost cried, but luckily someone helped me out. In the end, my mother-in-law felt sorry for treating me that way. My name is Jennifer. I'm 30 years old and married to Walter. We met in college through the mountain club, where we both love climbing mountains. Walter is younger than me and very good-looking. Sometimes I wonder why he chose me out of all the girls who like him. But he says he likes that I'm strong and don't complain, even when things are tough. Walter has a good job at a big company and makes a lot of money. We've been happy together since we got married, just like when we were students. But there's something that bothers me. Sometimes during dinner, Walter gets calls from his mom and goes to talk to her in another room. My mother-in-law calls Walter a lot, like every other day. She really loves her son, and Walter is always nice to her. Sometimes I think he's too close to his mom, like a mama's boy. But because she raised Walter well, I try to respect her too. But it feels like we don't really get along. I remember before we got married when we went to visit them. My mother-in-law didn't seem too happy when she found out I'm 2 years older than Walter and almost 30. She looked upset the whole time. But my father-in-law didn't mind. He said love is what matters and that I seem like a good match for Walter, especially because he has a soft side. But my mother-in-law didn't like that either. Since she couldn't argue with my father-in-law, she started picking on me when he wasn't looking. She'd say things like, "Oops, sorry, Jennifer. I think these snacks are bad. Let me get you something else," even though they were fine. It felt like she was trying to annoy me on purpose. I got really good at reading her expressions, like I was studying animals. "It's okay, I'll just cut off the bad part and eat the rest," I said with a smile, showing that I wasn't bothered by the spoiled fruit. Being in the mountain club taught me to make the most of what you have, even if it's not perfect. My father-in-law and Walter laughed and said, "That's typical Jennifer." My father-in-law jokingly told my mother-in-law not to serve me stuff like that, which kept the mood light. But I didn't realize I was being careless. "Sorry about that," I said, still laughing. But I caught my mother-in-law's disapproving look and the sound of her tongue clicking. There were other times too, like when she came back from Italy and got Walter a nice tie but gave me a cheap t-shirt with a fake logo. "Here, try on the tie, Jennifer, and put on the shirt too," she insisted. I could tell she was trying to bother me again. I don't think a tie goes with casual clothes. And I'm not feeling like trying on anything right now," I said with a forced smile, trying to keep things friendly. But inside, I was really annoyed. Afterwards, I only wore that t-shirt for things like gardening in the summer or as a joke with my friends in photos. I really couldn't stand looking at it. These little annoyances were subtle, so only I noticed them for what they were. When I talked to Walter about it, he just brushed it off, saying, "Mom's a bit weird, just let it go." But over time, these mean little things wore me down. We live about an hour away from my in-laws, so it was easy to visit them if we wanted to, which made me feel even worse. Then one day, Walter told me, "Jennifer, I'm sorry for the sudden news, but I've been transferred. It starts next month, so get ready." Walter's transfer came out of nowhere. He'd apologized, but secretly I was relieved. It meant we could put some distance between us and my in-laws. Plus, the new place was really close to my parents' house, so it felt like moving closer to home. "Okay, leave the planning to me. I'll ask my family for help too." I happily started getting ready for the move. Finally, I could escape my mother-in-law's mean behavior. I was nervous about our new life, but mostly I felt relieved to be getting away from her. Once we moved, I thought I could finally put some distance between us. But then, I got another call from my mother-in-law. "Hi, Jennifer. Why didn't you answer the phone? You're not avoiding my son to hang out with your parents, are you?" I wanted to sigh loudly, but I kept calm and said, "Sorry, I was busy at the store. Walter might feel tired in this new place, so I want to make sure he gets good meals." After that, my mother-in-law started calling every 2 days. Even though we saw each other less, we talked more. But most of the time, it was her making snide comments. She'd say things like, "My son is sensitive. I wonder if someone as tough as Jennifer can understand him." His high school girlfriend was so delicate, but now he seems to like different types. It was always things that made me feel uncomfortable. It seems like my mother-in-law doesn't have any other way to deal with her stress. I felt like I had become a punching bag labeled stress relief. What hurt the most were her mean comments about having children. Jennifer, you're already 30, right? Have you thought about kids? I wonder if you being older than my son will affect having a normal child. It was shocking to hear someone say that nowadays. But since it was something I was worried about, I couldn't help but cry after hanging up the phone. I wondered what my mother-in-law really thought of me. Did she think I wouldn't be hurt by what she said? After that, she kept calling frequently. But when I only gave safe answers to avoid conflict, maybe she got bored and stopped bullying me. I felt a huge relief. Then, on New Year's Day the next year, my husband and I went to my in-laws' house. They were picking us up from the airport. Hey Walter, Jennifer, it's been a while. My father-in-law waved and greeted us warmly. I was nervous about seeing my mother-in-law, but my father-in-law's friendliness made me feel better. Happy New Year, Mom and Dad. Happy New Year to both of you. Happy New Year, glad you're here. Happy New Year, Walter, good to see you. We exchanged New Year's greetings, but my mother-in-law didn't even look at me. Maybe she was upset about my distant response to her constant calls. Our relationship felt really awkward. I was trying to figure out how to handle the situation. You must be tired from the trip. How about we take a break at the airport cafe? My father-in-law suggested happily, seeming oblivious to the tension between my mother-in-law and me. Sounds good. Wasn't there a cafe on the second floor? Walter replied cheerfully, and we headed to a cafe inside the airport. Should I drive back? No, I'm still good to drive. While the men chatted, my mother-in-law and I sat in silence. Excuse me, I need to use the restroom, I said after ordering, getting up from my seat. Oh, maybe I'll go too, my mother-in-law said, standing up to follow me. I had a sinking feeling as we approached the entrance to the women's restroom, with my mother-in-law trailing behind me. Suddenly she said, since you can't ride in the car, why don't you just walk back? Confused, I turned to her, and there it was again, that same expression. We're going back as a family of 3. You're just a stranger, aren't you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Walk back from here to my in-laws' house? How far was that? And to call her son's wife a stranger? I was frozen in shock as my mother-in-law kept hurling words at me. I've been nice enough to call you often, but unlike Walter, you always respond coldly. Living near your parents' house has made you arrogant. I don't even want to think of you as my daughter-in-law. You're just a stranger. Her voice was getting louder. I was shocked, but I didn't want to argue in public, so I meekly replied, yes, I understand. Feeling too upset to go back to where Walter and my father-in-law were, I made my way towards the airport exit, moving slowly. Even though my mother-in-law told me to walk back, this was an airport. There had to be taxis or buses. I could go as far as I could by public transport and then walk the rest of the way. But more than that, I was worried about how I would face my in-laws when I finally arrived. And how would I spend the next few days there? Those thoughts weighed heavily on my mind. For the moment, I searched on my phone for transportation options to my in-laws' house. There was a bus leaving in just 10 minutes, but it wouldn't take me all the way there. I'd have to walk from where the bus dropped me off. It seemed like it would take about 3 hours in total. 3 hours, I could manage that with my legs used to climbing mountains. It wasn't impossible. But there was a big difference between walking for fun and walking because I was being excluded from the car due to harassment. Tears started to well up in my eyes. Was it my fault? If I had been nicer on the phone, even after being treated so badly, would this have happened? Lost in my thoughts as I walked, I suddenly felt a tap on my shoulder from behind. Jennifer, why are you walking here? It was my father-in-law's voice. Did my wife say something to you at the restroom entrance? I was heading there too, and I saw you two talking. Then you started walking away, so I followed. Seeing the concern in my father-in-law's eyes, the tears I had been holding back spilled over and streamed down my cheeks. Jennifer, what happened? I made up my mind to tell them the truth. Actually, I recounted exactly what my mother-in-law had said, and my father-in-law's expression turned to one of anger, fiercer than I had ever seen. Oh dear, she said that to my son's wife. My father-in-law's reaction surprised me. Then he said something I never expected. I'll walk with you, Jennifer. With that, my father-in-law positioned himself in front of me and began walking. Father-in-law, don't worry. I used to enjoy mountain climbing, and I went on many climbs with Walter when he was little. A 3-hour walk one way is nothing. Indeed, my father-in-law's steps were steady, not what you'd expect from someone who's 62 years old. Come on, let's go. But we didn't tell Walter we were leaving. Is that okay? I finally remembered that in my shock at my mother-in-law's words, I had just left without saying anything to Walter. Walter will be fine. They'll probably convince him to wait. I'll let him know, my father-in-law assured me, taking out his phone to text my mother-in-law. He told her he was walking back with me and that the car keys were in his bag. While we waited for the bus, my father-in-law's phone rang. He answered, his voice tinged with controlled anger. It was my mother-in-law on the other end. I heard what you said to Jennifer. If you're going to say things like that, then I won't ride in the car either. I could hear my mother-in-law's panicked voice shouting from the other end. That's not what happened. She wanted to walk for exercise. I was left dumbfounded by their exchange, more shocked than anything else. We'll discuss this when we get home, my father-in-law said before hanging up and putting his phone away. Shortly after, my phone started ringing. It was definitely my mother-in-law calling. Father-in-law and I exchanged looks. What could she possibly want now? To tell us to get back in the car? I definitely wasn't going to answer. I decided to ignore it as well. Father-in-law and I quietly boarded the bus and continued walking after getting off. This way is a shortcut. There's a bit of a slope here, but let's do our best. Father-in-law occasionally offered advice as we walked, making it feel like we were climbing a mountain together. However, I hadn't planned on walking so much today and was wearing regular boots. Father-in-law was in leather shoes. Our feet were surely going to hurt during this journey. I didn't speak much, but I did ask once, Father-in-law, are your feet okay? Won't walking for a long time in those shoes hurt? Father-in-law glanced at my feet and squinted. Looks like we're both in the same boat. I can't believe she'd make a woman walk such a long distance in those shoes. Father-in-law's stride remained steady. Both of us considered calling a taxi, but we didn't mention it, wanting to defy my mother-in-law. But Jennifer, you're strong. Walking such a long distance without complaining. That's probably what attracted Walter to you. Hearing that made me feel a bit better. We continued walking, stopping to buy drinks from vending machines and a grocery store to stay hydrated. After about 3 hours with the sun beginning to set, we finally reached my in-laws' house. Their car was parked out front. Mother-in-law and Walter must be home. We're back. Father-in-law opened the front door and Walter rushed over. Yeah, Jennifer, I was really worried. What happened? Why did you suddenly decide to walk back for exercise? Walter asked, concerned. Did you hear that from Mom? That's not it. Mom told Jennifer to walk back. Father-in-law explained, looking understandably tired as he sat down on a chair near the entrance. Mother-in-law, who had come out of the living room, looked pale and shocked. No, that's not what happened. It's not. There must have been a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? I couldn't hold back any longer. You said, since you can't ride in the car, why don't you walk back? Didn't you? That's what happened. I don't like lying. Thanks to that, it felt like my old mountain climbing club days. A 3-hour one-way walk was good exercise. Walter looked back at mother-in-law. He knew well that I wasn't the type to lie. The father-in-law, Walter, and I were all looking at my mother-in-law. She shouted, What? You trust this woman more than me. She's just a stranger to your family, right? You trust a stranger more than your own family. I wasn't allowed in the car because I'm a stranger. I whispered sably, Mom, I can't believe you'd say that. Jennifer is important to my family. I wanted you to feel the same, Walter said, his hand shaking with anger. If you're going to treat Jennifer like this, I'm done with you, Mom. I won't answer your calls anymore. Don't contact Jennifer either. Walter held my hand and said, Let's leave. Walter, wait. Walter shut the door and without looking back, took my hand and we left. A year later. Hey Jennifer, Walter, come over here. The view is amazing. Walter, his father, and I were climbing a mountain together. 6 months later, Walter got a job transfer and we moved back to where we used to live. Since the incident at New Year's, Walter's dad decided to get divorced and moved near our place. Climbing mountains together on weekends became a regular thing for us. Should we have lunch here? We eagerly started preparing our meal at the top of the mountain. While we were busy, Walter's dad began to talk. Mom went on a spending spree after the divorce. Even though we divided our property properly, it seems she's already having money problems. Maybe she felt lonely. The divorce was tough, with lots of crying and shouting. It seems like it's best for both of us to keep some distance now. She needs to find her own way too. Otherwise, she might end up taking her stress out on those close to her. I listened quietly to their conversation. I'll focus on my own life so I won't end up hurting others because of my stress. As I looked out at the view from the mountain with my precious family, I made that promise in my heart.